Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to speak about one of the great crises facing our country, and that is the high cost of college and the fact that hundreds and hundreds of thousands of young people who are bright, who would like to get a higher education, have now decided, because they do not want to leave school deeply in debt, that they are not going to go to college. And what a loss that is, not only to the individuals and the enhancement of their own lives, but it is a loss to our nation, because in a highly competitive global economy, we need the best educated workforce possible. And the fact that college is becoming a distant dream, an unreachable dream for millions of families, is a horrendous situation that this Congress must address. Mr. President, over the last 10 years, the cost of attending a public four-year college has increased by nearly 35% at a time when middle-class incomes have remained flat, and in fact, many families have seen a decline in their incomes. Of the students who do go to college, hundreds of thousands graduate with significant debt, on average over $27,000 on average. Mr. President, just this morning, I was talking to a staffer of mine who is $119,000 in debt. And what was her crime? How did she accrue that debt? Did she go on a spending spree? Did she lose her money in a gambling casino? Her crime was that she wanted to go to law school. And she came out of law school $150,000 in debt. Today, that is down to $119,000. I have talked to doctors and dentists who are now several $100,000 in debt. Mr. President, the important point to make is that there was once a time in the United States when that kind of college and graduate school indebtedness did not exist. Only a few decades ago, this country made a commitment to our students that if you worked hard, if you studied hard, and if you wanted to pursue a higher education, you could do so at little or no cost. That was what we used to do. And unfortunately, in that very, very important area, we have regressed and regressed significantly. Mr. President, until the 1970s, the City University of New York, one of the important and best educational systems in the country, the cost was completely free. It was free. The University of California system, one of the largest and best university systems in the world, did not begin charging tuition until the 1980s. In fact, in 1965, average tuition at a four-year public university was $243. Now, Mr. President, you know as well as I do that we are living in a highly competitive global economy. And if our nation is to succeed, we need to have the best educated workforce in the entire world. But the sad truth is that we are now competing against other nations around the world who make it much easier for their young people to go to college and to go to graduate school than is the case in the United States of America. According to a report released last year by the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the United States was one of the few advanced countries in the world that did not increase its public investment in education over the last decade. From 2008 to 2010, most advanced countries experienced significant economic decline as a result of the Wall Street collapse. Despite that, the vast majority of countries increased educational spending by 5% or more. The United States was one of the few nations to decrease overall education spending. Mr. President, I live about an hour away from Canada, in northern Vermont, and in Canada, average annual tuition fees were $4,200 in 2010, roughly half of what they were in the United States. And yet, the OECD says Canada is one of the most expensive countries for a student to go to school. Mr. President, Germany, an international competitor of ours, is in the process of phasing out all tuition fees. Germany is in the process of phasing out all tuition fees. Even when German universities did charge tuition, it was roughly $1,300 per student. According to the European Commission, in 2012, the following countries do not charge their students any tuition. And these are countries that we are competing against. These are countries where young people go to college without any out-of-pocket expense. Those countries are Austria, Denmark, Finland, Norway, Scotland, and Sweden. In Europe, university systems enjoy a very high level of public funding. The EU average is 77%. In other words, in countries throughout Europe, Austria, Belgium, Denmark, and all of the rest, what governments understand is that investing in higher education is terribly important for the individual students and her families, but in addition, it is enormously important for the competitive capabilities of those countries. So you have countries like Austria, Belgium, Denmark, each putting in more than 88% of public funding into their universities. In the United States, the number is 36%. So countries all over the world, those that don't provide free higher education, pump significantly more into their university systems than we do. Mr. President, the result of all of this are several very significant points. First, you have many working class and middle class young people who are looking at the economic picture that we face as a nation, looking at their own lives, and they are saying, do I want to go to college and leave school $50,000 or $60,000 in debt, and how am I going to pay off of that debt once I leave school? And many of these young people, tragically, are saying, you know what? I don't want to take that risk. I don't want to leave school deeply in debt. I will not go to college. And what a tragic situation that is for our entire country, because we are losing the intellectual potential of all of those young men and women. And second of all, for those who do go to college, they are coming out of school with an incredible chain of indebtedness around their necks, which impacts every aspect of their lives. It determines what kind of jobs they will get. Will they do the job that they had hoped to do their whole lives, their lives' dream? The work that they were looking forward to doing, or are they going to gravitate to those jobs which simply pay them a lot of money, enable them to pay off their debt? Mr. President, for the first time in our country's history, American families have more student debt than college debt, and that just is an extraordinary reality. All over this country, families are struggling with debt, in a way in a way they never have before. The average loan balance for American graduates has increased by 70% since 2004. Average student debt is now near $27,000. In Vermont, it is even higher at $28,000. 1 in 8 borrowers are carrying more than $50,000 in student debt. The percentage of families in the United States with outstanding student debt increased from 33% in 2005 to 45% in 2010. So, Mr. President, the bottom line here is that we have a huge crisis which is impacting millions of individual families and individual young people. But from a national perspective, it is a crisis which is impacting our competitiveness in the global economy. There was once a time, not so many years ago, when we had the best educated workforce in the world, when we had a higher percentage of college graduates than any other country on earth. That is not the case today. So I think we have got to do some very, very, very hard thinking about the crisis regarding college affordability and the crisis regarding student debt. And if this country is to remain internationally competitive in the global economy, we need some bold ideas in terms of how we address these crises. And I can tell you that in Vermont, as I speak to young people around my state, this is the issue foremost on their minds. The young people in high school are wondering about how they can afford to go to college. The students in college are worried about how they're going to pay off their college debt. Our job must be to say that to every young person in this country, that if you are a serious student, if you study hard, you are going to be able to get a higher education regardless of the income of your family. That you are all going to be able to get the best education our nation can provide you based on your ability and not on the income of your family. And this is an issue of enormous importance to individuals around the country, but again, it is an issue of huge consequence for the economic future of this country. So, Mr. President, in the coming weeks, I will be introducing legislation. I know there's a lot of other good legislation that is going to be coming to the floor. But this is an issue of huge consequence. It is an issue that must be addressed.